Hi everybody, good morning. This is Phil Demetriadis here, and I thought I'd introduce something new. What I decided to do is I like to get up early in the morning and draw, and so I usually wake up at about 3:30, and then I sit down here in my studio. And what I thought I'd do is start turning the recorder on and recording myself working. So here it is. I've invented Morning Sketch. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on different animals, different characters, and talk about my process in drawing and sketching to see if that can help influence you guys as students out there who are trying to get better at your craft. And I thought, what other better way than to sit here and talk with you and be able to display some of what I do and get you involved with that. Okay, so anyway, here we go. So welcome to Morning Sketch, and we're going to start off. What I've done is I've picked a bunch of animals, and I'm going to start off with water buffaloes, and I'm going to show you part of my process and try to walk you through that and see if I can get you guys to understand and maybe help you out a little bit more on your endeavors in your art process. Okay, all right, so let me jump forward here, and first thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about what my process is, and this is a huge part of my process, okay, which is basically and I tell all my students this. You'll hear me talk about it in a lot of my demos. And that process is I don't just get handed a subject matter and dive into it and start drawing. You know, that's really sort of the bad way to work. What you have to do is you have to really pay attention to your subject matter, and you have to gather a reference, and then you have to look at it. So I want to walk you along part of that process, and I want to show you a couple of the things that I look for when I'm working, okay? And hopefully that'll help you out a little bit. Sorry, let me move. I'm trying to get this all set up here. I have the recorder set up. And yeah, it looks like that's pretty good here. Let me make sure my layer's set so I can draw on top of it. 1 second here. Okay, get a bright red. All right, okay, so basically what I'm doing when I'm working, I'm already having some problems with Sketchbook Pro here. Let me pause the recorder for just a second. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I just had to go recalibrate my Cintiq. If you ever open up in your drawing and you notice, like I noticed my pen marks weren't coming out correctly and then I noticed my eraser wasn't functioning on my pen, that means you need to calibrate your monitor. And I usually have that problem only when I'm working on my PC. But anyway, let's dive into the good stuff here, okay? So the first thing I do is I look at reference. I go gather reference, and I'm going to talk about with you right now what are the things I'm looking for in my reference. And then I'm going to sketch on top of this to sort of indicate that. So the first thing I'm looking for, you know, in my water buffaloes, I'm always looking at the position of the head to see what's going on. And one of the big things I notice with a water buffalo that really sets it apart from like a standard cow or a bull is the fact that it has these upper horns that are up here, you know. So you're going to see these upper horns, and look at where they're attaching. I like to draw through my shape and realize that they're attaching on the side of the head. The other thing that you notice, just very similar to a cow, is after the head ball, you have this protrusion that comes forward of the mouth. So you can think of that. That's pretty important to me to establish how that comes out. The other thing that I tend to notice when working with these guys is look at the angle that comes down, that drops from the base of the chin and goes all the way down here and connects to, I'm going to say, the center mass of the chest, okay? So where the legs come down, you can't really see it, but if I were to draw through here, you'd see what I'm talking about, where the legs are down here and this huge weight mass is coming down and wrapping around part right there. So that's pretty important to me right now before I start. So just, you know, if I were to make a little guideline here, like number one, first thing I'd write down is, you know, the position of the horns. Number two, second thing I notice is on that head ball, look at the ears. See where the ears are positioned? So the ears are really about, you know, I've noticed in the reference I've obtained that they're about midway, okay? So I'm going to put midway of the head ball, okay? Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. Everybody in my house has been a little sick. And between freelance and teaching full-time, I'm starting to get a little wore out here, but I want to keep these demos going for you guys. So, all right. And then the other thing I mentioned, number three, was that slant, I'm going to say, to the midsection. Okay, sorry my writing's horrible, but that's the slant that's going down right there. Okay, and then number 4, I also forgot to mention about that protrusion. So this shape protruding outward from that head ball. Okay, so let's go take a look at another guy. Now, this guy, what's cool that I noticed is that, so I'm going to put a little note here, right? Put a little star here, different countries. So when you get into different countries, especially around Asian influenced countries, you'll notice you start to get a curve on the spike. So here I have more of an upward angle curve, okay? And I'm not exactly sure where that was from, but what that means is it's something that I need to investigate as an artist. I need to go back into my reference and figure out, well, how come this guy has, hooks that are going this way? And then I also notice that his ears tend to be up a little bit more, and he has a larger head ball shape. Do you see that? So his ears are inserting up a little bit more, about right here. Then his face protrudes outward. And then also the thing I noticed about this guy is, man, look at that neckline. It's almost like he has no neck. It literally comes from his chin and boom, drops straight down, and then we have, the horns in there. Okay, so again, I'm noticing these key factors. The neck here has so much more of a higher angle that's protruding upward. Also the horns. Okay, coming over to this guy. Now it's funny, as I looked at this guy, and at first I thought it was like a base cow, and I was like, man, it almost looks like a cow. But then I looked back up and followed the page, and it is a water buffalo. So one of the things I noticed on here that I really like are the ears. See how the ears sort of do this fold over here, and then the ears come back down and they sort of drop like in here. So to me, that was really, really important, very pivotal, these large ears. And then again, I've noticed the shape of the horn. These horns sort of go back, okay, and they almost wrap around fully, versus when I come back over here and I look at some of my other reference, these were down and up, and then these, what I noticed, almost felt like these were in segments, like there was a side here. So if I were to draw them, they almost look like they're like this, meaning they have a dedicated front plane, a dedicated side plane. Okay, so again, that's more notation for me to put down as I start to sketch, looking at my reference. Here's something else that I noticed on this particular piece of reference material, okay, is that looking at the eyes felt like they're a real definite bubble shape, and they sort of protrude outward from the skeletal structure, okay, right here. And with them protruding outward like that, let me back up a couple steps here. I noticed the way that the skin sort of folds over the eyes, and then I also noticed the sort of drag of skin, I'll say, that's there. And then mentioning that skin drag, look at the skin drag here. So I'll write that right here next to my reference. Skin drag around the eyes, so I'm going to put eyes in here, around the nose. I also noticed the offset, what I mentioned earlier, the offset ears, okay? And so let me come back here and let's take a look. Now here's another water buffalo that I found, and I actually really like this piece of reference. Anytime I find an animal that's engaging with a human being, that's really important, because you have to think of it, there's a bond that's transitioning and happening between those two, and there really is. The bond is that the animal is showing the human being is showing respect for the animal, and usually love and compassion, and the animal is allowing that individual to either pet them or to be engaged with them. Okay, look at that water buffalo. Look at the size and mass. If that creature did not want those kids over there, all it would have to do is shake its rear end quarters, and it would just knock those kids over, and it would knock them right off. And so to me, part of that relationship is really important, and I'm going to show you in a minute here another piece of reference that I have that's also displaying that same amount of information for you. So, but now look at the difference here, man. Look in terms of the reference. Look at the head ball shape. Okay, look at the front. Okay, and then look at that neckline. Just boom! It's like, what a huge angle. And then look at the difference here. How these horns are they're gigantic, and how they come downward like that. So if I'm going to sketch that, I'm really going to need quite a bit of real estate on my paper to really get that in, which is, extremely important to me. And again, just looking at this photo, every time I pull it up, I notice something different. So I notice the gesture of this boy sitting here and how he's sort of reaching down and petting him, indicating, that he appreciates and respects and loves this animal. And, I think that's really important and part of what you're doing, especially when you're gathering reference. Okay, hold on a second here, guys. Let me jump forward here. So that was the first page. And let me, hold on. Let me delete all my notes here. Select all, delete, okay. And let's go, oops, sorry, my bad. Here's my second page reference, okay. And let's start diving into here and look at what I found. Another great page of some more excellent reference with engaging with a human being again. I mean, you have to realize for some cultures and people across the world, this animal is their being. It is their life bond to helping them raise crops, cultivate, grow, farm. I mean, they provide milk, I mean, what a huge importance there, right? And look at the true endearment of this man's face in relationship with that animal, and even the animal seems quite content to be there and to be receiving that affection. So here again, some of the things I noticed are the different positions right here of the horns, how they're sweeping up. I also, here's something I noticed here on this character, is I noticed this eye patch. When I look at that eye patch, I'm noticing the fur that's up in here, okay? And that fur is sort of separate. So you have an area of skin down here in the eye patch, and then you have fur that's down here. So that's really important for me because that's something that I could accentuate in part of my designs, and I can keep in the back of my brain, and then I can use. The other thing I notice in here, obviously this animal is used for farming. It has some type of a nose ring that goes through it, and then there's other rope and pieces that come down below. The other thing that I notice is that this, in my reference, is that this animal has more of a really furry, sort of hangy fur that's coming off of it. And again, while the lower protrusion extrudes out a little bit, then there's a direct link, so there's an angle. So just one thing to do when you're looking at your reference is look at some of the angles that are taking place here. We have angles going this way. I have angles going this way, angles going this way. So that's another thing I look for. So right here I'm going to mention, we talked about that eye patch, right? The other thing is to me, which is really huge on here, is the angles of deflection. Okay, so if you want to think of it as contrapposta and figure drawing, where you have the hips going one way, the shoulders going another way, I'm noticing a huge play in angles that are happening, okay? And so that right there, there's a lot for me to gather from that particular reference, okay? Cool, I want to make sure I wasn't drawing on my, okay? So I'm going to go over a little saying that I learned a long time ago, which is, in the world of art and drawing and design, you're really only as good as your reference, and it's true because you have to spend that time. And this took me, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes to gather this reference. Imagine, I'm busy working and then also, freelance, and I'm a dad. Imagine if I could sit down and spend hours on reference and really get into, looking at what's the difference between a water buffalo in Africa and a water buffalo in, India, Nepal. What are the traits they develop because of their environment? What do the hoofs look like when they walk on dirt or non-dirt? What's the direction alignment of their horns? All that type of stuff comes into play. Okay, so again here, look at this guy. Look at how high his head ball is. Look at where his horns are. And then look at the low angle of the ears coming out. Okay, so to me that's really important. I like this guy too because it looks like his horns have been gnawed on, or they've sort of been broken. And I like the fact that they sort of go backwards in their direction, sort of counter angle. And I looked up water buffalo, that came up, but technically, I mean, maybe that could be a version of a cow in another country, So look at this guy, man. You talk about, this was really huge, and there's a couple of reasons why this was really huge for me. One, outside of the face, look at that secondary structure that goes down here. That is huge for me. And I mean, looking at the overhead ball size, the ears are, again, they're sort of coming in at the middle, and then look at the shape of the ears. They're almost like they come out like this, very round, and they're sort of beat up with like patch marks in them, where they've almost looked like they've, I don't know if it's been flies or what, but they've been gone through, like they've been gnawed apart and they've been messed with. Again, look at something that's really important to me in drawing, and it doesn't matter if I'm, doing environments, working in Maya, or doing character design. A lot of times I've been getting into doing more storyboarding for artists as well. That's why my interest in character design has increased so much. But look at the importance of the visual weight here. Let me write that down here. The visual weight for you so you understand that. Okay, look at that. That's like a bag right here. Look at that. That's like a hefty bag, okay, filled with massive amounts of like pancake batter that create volume. And then look at that. So you have, when you're looking up here at the upper part of the leg here and how it connects, look at that weight and what it does. I mean, you got to think of that as the pectoralis muscles. And this character has so much weight and or so much, I don't want to say fat to it, but just overall volume and its mass that this is protruding out. And then also look at the difference in the size relationships. Look at the thickness from here to here, and then look at the thickness from here to here. So that's going to be really, really important to me as I start drawing, that overall volume. So without a doubt, this example with volume, weight, visual mass is really important. That's really going to guide me. Another thing here outside of the horns and the ears and stuff I noticed was the nose. The nose is sort of like an overall triangle shape like this, and then the nose curves in like so, okay, and then sort of comes out, and then in the midsection where the base of the mouth is, the nose curves up again like this. So you have a series of, I'm going to call them indents. You have an indent here on the nose, and you have another indent down there, and that's what makes this really sort of, cool facial element here that curves, comes down, curves here like that. You see that? So being mindfully aware of those indents, and then going back and looking at some of the other faces and seeing what their indents, which some of them are very similar. But then again, I guarantee you, look at that. That guy has a much longer indent with not that much of an indent on the side. So that means when I'm drawing, I could fully take aware of that, because I can sketch this character with a nose that might look like this, stretched out, and then he has that indent in there, and the nose might look like that. You see that? So that's important to me. That's how I take something like that and I extrapolate it into part of my design. Okay. The other thing I noticed, now this is, to me, it's a complex animal to draw. Why? Because you really have a dedicated facial features that are totally different, and then you have a dedicated body. So what I'm going to do in my first sets of demos for you guys is I'm just going to sit and sketch faces and have fun with it. I'm going to have a good time, just rough sketch the way I like to draw, listening to music, and go for the faces. And then I'm going to come back and add on the bodies. And I'll do another lecture for you on the bodies, but I just want to point something out, because this is the type of information you need to be really, really gathering and bringing into your brain. Look at the bony mark land. So something that you can do in figure drawing, and you can also do it inside character design, is you need to really pay attention to the bony landmarks. Okay, the bony landmarks represent basically support of vertebrae and weight. Okay, and look at here, look at that huge hump right here. That's a bony landmark where, part of the shoulder blades are coming up in the skin, and then also on the vertical, the vertebrae axis. Look at that bony landmark right here. So every time I see those two bony landmarks, those are going to be really important to me in understanding then how the rest of the weight and the muscle mass is drifting off of those landmark points. Look at here. So you'll start to notice, you see that representative where the legs stand tall, so the shoulder blades are protruding outward, and then coming downward off the back, you always have that little bump on the back. Okay, so here the neck dips down a little bit, and then boom, you get that shoulder mass. Okay, right in there. So again, that's something, as I start sketching, I can start to indicate a little bit more in part of my design process. Okay, give me a second here. Let me delete this. Let's select all. Let's delete those drawings. Let's go to my third page here. All right, I got 5 pages of reference, so not to bore you guys, but you know what? You better hang in there. Don't, this is a lot of people don't record themselves working, and especially a lot of people that work in the industry. And I like to do it because I have a positive belief system on giving things back out and handing information, because that's just going to make you grow is an artist, and believe it or not, it forces me to do these things, and it makes me grow talking about it and going over this information so much. Okay, and I really think it sort of inspires my students. So why not support your art community and support the artists around the world by sharing your information with them, right? That's my thought on it. So look at those beautiful curves right there on this guy. The other thing is, look at this guy. He's like the crazy one-eared, this is like your crazy uncle that gets in fights and drinks a lot and then shows up, or to family reunions, and he's got one ear that's missing. That's what I got out of this, was like crazy one-eared Uncle Dan. Actually, what's funny about that is I have an uncle who has one eye, and he's always been sort of the wild bunch, my Uncle Dan. So I like to think of that as, look, here's crazy ear. Also, look at the shape of that ear. That's really pivotal to me. He's got these huge horns. Imagine this guy coming in, and he's just sort of like, he's talking and he's like, hey, everybody, where you guys been? I've been out at the bar for a little bit, So I can start to get a lot out of a character like that right there. This was a great piece of reference right here. What I really like about it is the interaction of the birds. So it gave me this great idea of this old water buffalo, an old water buffalo who has a bunch of friends that are like birds, okay? And these birds hang out with him. They follow him around. They sit on his back. They sit on his horns. And then imagine him from a side view. They like lay on his nose right here. They talk to him all the time. So this one little piece of reference that I found has now taken me from a base water buffalo, and it's given me a whole great idea of having a personal interaction of like 6 or 7 characters all being together. And to me, I think that's a golden piece of information. Okay, so that's really working well. And I'm going to come over here and again, look at this. How beautiful is that? Another interaction piece. A little girl, riding around. Look at how happy she is, And the water buffalo is going back and forth. I think that's really cool. It's wonderful. Okay, and of course, gives me the idea of sketching a kid on top of a couple of my designs. The one thing I noticed about this guy is, look at the ears in here. Look at that big chunky piece of fat, like he's been had his ears messed up in a little fight or a battle. One thing I noticed about this guy I thought was really cool. Look at how the head's hanging. See that? So in relationship to the body, here's that vertical mass of the shoulder blade. There's that bony landmark, right? See that? So look at the head. So if I'm drawing a bad water buffalo, I really, really look at that. Look at that angle in there. To me, that would be really important to jump onto that angle and apply that. I mean, look at what this guy's doing. He's sort of looking at us like how dare you come to my water hole? You better stay away. Okay? I mean, great stuff here, right? And again, this is, you guys are in a generation. When I was younger, we didn't have the internet. When I was 18, 19, when I was going to college, I was 24, and the internet was like just coming out in like 1996. And you could get on it and go to a couple sites, but it wasn't anything like it is today. You guys have Pinterest, you have Google, you have Bing, you have photography sites. I mean, it's just crazy to look at everything. The other thing I like to do is I also like to make a couple art pages on fellow artists. I like to look at what I'm looking for here is how they use the shapes. I'm looking at how they distorted and stretched shapes, how they played with their shapes in relationship to the bodies, how they pushed or pulled down shapes to get things to work. Also stylistic variations, okay? These are great pieces of work. I don't know who did this piece, and it's a lion, but I really like the graphic, elements that are in here that represent that. So I could take this stylistic approach and I could use that to guide me towards my own work, okay? And then I noticed, I came over here. I also noticed, look at the body size, the body shapes in here in terms of the center masses. Here, this artist is playing up different shapes. Really nice designs. Very fun. So, I grab these. I don't copy them. Of course not. I grab these and I look at them to see what the artist is doing, because that's going to guide me along. So here, what I noticed is that the artist is sketching and he's getting these sort of bottleneck shapes, and then he's coming in and putting the horns in, right? That's pretty cool, okay? But the other thing the artist is doing is that, remember that sweep? They're really exaggerating that, the shoulder blades, putting the shoulder blades really up high and then bringing it down, and keeping a lower neckline coming into the base like this. Okay, that's huge for me in terms of basic shape, because I get to see something and then it gives me an option to play with as well. Okay, so that was one of my passes there. Give me a second here. Excuse me, that was one of my pages of reference there. I think I have more. Come on, I'm trying to zoom back up here and get up. What time is it? It's almost time for me to go wake my kids up for school. Let me see here. And oh, I'm sorry, I turned it on. I didn't even realize what I was doing. Here's another piece I grabbed. Again, I just went on Pinterest. Again, look at somebody really pushing up the examples right here to see that, how large that mass is. Look at what's happening here in the curve. The face is really distorted. It's very nicely done. There's a lot happening there in terms of playing with shape and applying. I mean, let me see if I can zoom in there a little bit more. Look at that face. Look at the play, the squash and stretch on the horns. Look at the ears popping down. So again, looking for these basic similarities, seeing what this artist did. Love the curving flow of those ears. Okay, this is a nice graphic view, you know, good side view of a character. This is, I like this style, but it usually works. It can be really hard doing a graphic style like that when you have a character that has to go into a 3/4 view like this, you know, where we're seeing, you know, a center line down the character. That's going to be a little bit harder to pull off. So I like that shot. I like the way the guy's playing with it graphically, whoever did that. This was also cool. Another nice piece. Love the center line in there. Love the way this guy's drawing. The mass feels good. Good squash and stretch of shapes. Get a good feel of how they're going from thick into thin in there, and I think that's also working very nicely. Okay. Excellently done. And of course, you know that's from Disney. I can't talk. Excuse me. That is from Disneyland, their version of a water buffalo, also known as Water Disney when I combine the sentences, right? That was in Zootopia. I like that design. I thought it was fun, something different. And I came across this, and this really, I think, is Melissa did this. I don't know who she is, but a really, really wonderful piece here just to critique on it. I mean, look at the extension of those. I mean, to me, that's really important, because her distorting the character's upper tusk like that, it's really almost making the creature look like it's somewhere between like an old mammoth, and really extorting and pushing those shapes and elements of the creature. The other thing I like is how she positioned the eyes so much more low and made this square head. So to me, that was a huge influence for me to look at, and then for me to, you know, stop and then go into my sketching. So do you see, you know, when I'm going through all these different pages of reference here, you know, I'm basically just going through and finding notes, curves, shapes, lines, and looking at how all these elements come together and how they interact with each other. And that's what gets me going. So I'm going to start sketching for you. And again, remember, part of my process on sketching is just getting in there and sketching. Sometimes I'm a little looser. Sometimes, you know, I go the wrong way. Sometimes I do an animal that ends up differently. Remember, part of sketching is the process of elimination. So my goal is to sketch and then keep adding to it, and then I can eliminate later on as I move through, and I could take my designs and then start moving to a different level to see where I end up. Okay, so enjoy, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Hope you like this. Bye-bye. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to do a voiceover here because I made the mistake of accidentally having Pandora playing in the background while I was drawing, and I found out that that was not okay with YouTube. They got upset and they kicked the video back. So what I did is I went in on my WaterBuffalos here, and I sped it up 100%, so it's at 200%. So if it looks a little bit faster, I have 56 minutes of drawing, which is really 2 hours of drawing for you, and I comprised it all down, and now I'm going to sit here and do a little voiceover. So I'm at school, and I'm just going to talk about what I'm doing. So you've seen some of these in my other demos. This is what I like to do, is I like to break out with simple shapes, and I take a bunch of different shapes and I lay them out on a page, as you can see, and then I prefer just to go over them and then figure out ways to expand and push based off of the notes that I gave you a couple of minutes ago that deal with all that good information about the importance of the materials that I received from looking at the reference. So, for example, earlier when I was looking at the reference, I was talking about all kinds of different things about the water buffaloes, about the placement of the ears, the eyes, the lips, the variation in the noses, the angles of the different faces. So by going into this allows me to sort of, record over everything and then explain to you what my process is. So I like to start on something, sketch it out, and then sometimes I'll come back and revisit it again, So I'm always thinking about different shapes, different types of eyes. How am I going to add the nose in? Do I want a long nose, a squashy nose? One of the things I do like about drawing with Sketchbook Pro is that they have a great undo feature that allows me to go back pretty quickly. And as I start to develop characters, it gives me the ability to figure out what they're looking like and how I want to push them. So anyway, probably start to ramble on too much. Some of these characters that I'm sketching here, again, I just start with a variety of different shapes, and sometimes it takes me in the direction that I want, and sometimes it doesn't. And then, as you've noticed in a couple of the other character design videos, it gives me the opportunity to go back in and take the faces I do like and then draw on those and push those to another level again. So, part of the whole process of what we're doing here is the process of elimination, and the more variations that I make and the more I draw, the easier that process becomes. Okay? All right, quiet for a little bit while this just goes for a little. Still thinking about some of those same proportions where the ears are in relationship to that head ball, how the horns are placing in. So in my mind, when I'm sketching right now, I'm just trying to think about the variances that I can offer in terms of maybe making the nose larger or smaller, squashing and stretching, moving, the hole for the horn up higher. Do I want to have curved horns or straight horns? And then, once I get a couple that I really start to like, I could take these and then start sketching the body and sort of merge them together with faces, and then I can create a lineup. So, let's say roughly 4 hours of drawing, and I can have a lineup of about 10 different characters that I really like, So, part of it's just getting in there and having fun with it and seeing what comes out of the drawing. And now that I learned my lesson about not letting Pandora play while I work, I'll make sure next time I just voice record over it, because I got to be honest, I feel sort of awkward sitting here looking at my self-drawing, speeding it up, and having to voice over it. Sort of feel like I don't know what to say because I'm in a different moment right now watching myself draw rather than in the moment of drawing, explaining what I'm doing. But it's all part of the process, right? So you can see a little bit more of those shapes. They're just sort of real simple shapes there that are just, various designs. I don't feel like I have to commit to anything, but having variations in these shapes, like if you look over in the upper left-hand corner, I have a small head ball, and then I have a sort of a 90 against a curve. So one thing I like to do is I do like thinking of opposites when they're placed together. I feel like that gives you better design options. So if I'm going to have a sharp edge or a 90, I want to make sure there's a curve coming on the other side or not too far from it. If I have small eyes, maybe big ears. If I have really rounded eyes, maybe a pointy nose. Okay, just always sort of thinking about opposites and how to get them in. Something else too that I just to mention this, back in the day when I was a student here at Fullerton College, I was really lucky when I had Marshall Vandriff. We were talking about designing and learning. We were talking about environments and illustration, and we were talking about how to become better at implying an emotional impact into your drawing. And so one of the things that Marshall recommended that I do was he told me over at UCLA Extension there was a class with a gentleman named Don Richardson, and Don Richardson was one of he's since passed, but he was one of the original actors from New York who had came up with, like, during the 20s and the 30s, the foundational principles for acting. Now there were some other artists, other theatrical artists that did the same thing, but the thing about Don that was so different is he was sort of non-method, I guess you would say, because a good example of that was, I remember in Don's class he talked about the movie Apocalypse Now, and there's a scene in there where one of the key characters, who was oh gosh, what's his, Charlie Sheen's dad, Martin Sheen, right? He had to play a guy that was drunk, and so what did Martin Sheen do? Is he shows up to the set completely intoxicated, hammered, and then goes and does the role, and literally in the movie you'll see it. He put his hand into a mirror and he actually slit his hand open, and he was drunk, he was hammered, and he was bleeding. So when they cut, they had to like patch him up and take him to the hospital and everything. And so the thing about Don Richardson is Don Richardson was against that type of acting. Don Richardson's point was you need to learn what the emotional intent of your scene is. So it doesn't matter if you're animating or you're drawing an environment. It's really figuring out and narrowing down what that point is. And so from an actor's point of view, he was trying to get actors to think about what's the emotional impact you're trying to convey, and how that relates to us is when we're sketching and drawing characters, you have to find what part of that emotion of the character is and how it's developing. Are they, do they have a pointy nose, and are they sort of a leader, or are they more of a follower? Do they have a bunch of round features and they look sort of goofy, or what is the particular attribute about the character that makes it work? So Don Richardson would make people get up in front of the class and act, but he would give you a particular theme that you had to do. For example, one was like sadness that you had lost a member of your family. Another one was your boyfriend or girlfriend had just broke up with you, and you had to go up there and act that. So obviously, the anti-method is that you wouldn't want to go out and break up with your girlfriend in real life and then come there and be all angry and frustrated. So people would get up there and they would act a certain way, and that's how, so what I'm getting at is, in that class I learned a lot. Even though it was an acting class, it taught me a lot about, now I see why Marshall recommended it, is it got me to think a lot about the emotional impact of the character and what is developing into the drawing of the sketch that you're doing. And part of that is just the fun exploration of drawing and just applying different shapes and thinking of opposites and seeing what comes out of them, and then being able to go back on top of those sketches and then add more to them, So if you look around, you can still find that book on Don Richardson. It was a really thin book. I've seen it for sale. If you look on it on Amazon, it's a book on Don Richardson, and it talks about the importance of I think it's something about like feeling and not acting, basically. But it was really cool. Little side story. I remember in that class, he got a girl up there who had to, she had to act like she just lost somebody in her family. And this was the coolest thing, is he taught everybody in the class how to cry. And what was really cool is he talked about crying was based on your emotional breathing pattern. So if you change your breathing pattern and you start like huffing and puffing a little bit, you can get yourself to cry. And he had a girl stand up in class, and she started like huffing and puffing, and he was telling her what to do, and boom, she just started crying. And it was the coolest thing, because then he's told her, remember that emotion you just did, and then like 10 minutes later he said, cry for me, and she's able to bring that emotion and start crying in a couple of minutes. So I think that was like a really great example. And how does all that apply? Well, when you're working into character design, you're creating shapes, variations, and applying linear detail onto drawings, and you depending on the position of the eyes, the shapes of the horns, the ears, you're really telling us a lot about the character of the person. And one thing that really helped me quite a bit, I learned this from some animators. I never really wanted to animate because I could never really bounce a ball right or do any of the animation tests that you had to do with 2D traditional animation. But one thing that was really important to me is having a mirror next to you, or having like a little tape recorder. So when you're drawing characters, if you're thinking of the emotional impact of a character, a lot of times when I'm sketching, I'm doing the voice. And next time when I'm drawing at home, I'll make sure I include that. So if I'm doing the water buffalo, it helps me to think. I think about Don Richardson talking to the acting students. So I start thinking about, does my character have a deep voice? Does he have a high whiny voice? Does he talk like maybe he has, like, remember Marlon Brando in The Godfather? He actually had like implants in his cheeks to make him look like he had these big swollen cheeks, and when he would talk, he was like, we could barely hear him, and it was like this low voice. So when you're doing characters, for me, that's something that really helps me quite a bit. Is, I get into a particular shape, and it allows me to think about, what the voice of that character might be, and then by getting that out a little bit, voila, I start to develop the characters a little bit with a little bit more precision, and reflecting upon part of that emotional feel. So anyway, yeah, that's a little side note. If you happen to look that book up, I think it's not too big of a book. It's maybe like a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch, and by Don Richardson on Amazon. I think you'd really find that a fun read. And what's really cool too is when I look around for inspiration, one of the things that inspired me is I found this great video. I can't find it anymore, though. I think someone took it down. It was at Pixar, and it was one of the key animators who animates Woody, who I guess used to be a 2D traditional animator, and he also used to be and he's a 3D animator now. And he would come out of his cubicle and do Woody. Like, he would walk around his apartment, and he talked about the importance of walking and doing Woody. And it was so cool because he would sit there and throw his arms and his legs out and like snap them, and he would act like he was some type of a blow up, not blow up, I was gonna say like a blow up mannequin or doll or something, but he was acting like what's that word? What do you call those? You guys, what do you call those puppets on the arms? Marionettes. Yeah, he's acting like a marionette toy, that had the strings attached, and he was able to do Woody and make it very, very convincing. It also reminds me, like, when you see those, if you ever taken a CPR class and you see those like dead mannequins that you have to work on, imagine one of those rigged and coming to life and having to talk. It would have limited function and mobility, but you can add a lot of life to that if you had to animate it. So anyway, it was pretty cool watching him do that. And not only would he do the gestures of Woody and walk like him, but he would do the voice. So while he's animating and drawing him, he was literally acting out the scene from his desk while working on a Cintiq, and Maya posing the character. And to me, that's what part of bringing the character to life is all about. I noticed on this guy, he started to leave a little bit, and part of that was my decision on the lower jaw. By putting that curve in there, I start to make him look a little bit more like a troll than he does a water buffalo. But that's something that I could always fix, because remember when I was showing you my reference sheets talking about the angular reference, I realized after looking in this that that's sort of a mistake on my part. I erased it and went back, but now looking back at it again, I'm thinking, nope, I should have done that low angle from the chin back down to that, the pectoralis muscles that are located right in between where the legs are on the water buffalo. That would give me a much better feel of that character. This guy right here, I really like this guy a lot. I just happened to sketch that shape, and when I was sketching this, I was thinking of an old man walking, and I was thinking of when I go to my mom's retirement home, they have these old guys walking around the corner that are going to dinner, and they have that 7th vertical vertebrae that pushes up. And remember, I talked about when I was looking at water buffaloes, there are 2 main bony landmarks on the buffalo. So I want to use that one, which is in between their scapulas, is to pop out. So I thought I'd put a curve in there, and I like that feel, and it started to give me that feel of, wow, this guy is maybe like this old water buffalo that's, lived in part of, just say, I don't even know if there's water buffaloes in the Amazon, but I just imagine him living through like years and years of experience and surviving hunters and lions, and he's sort of negative, and he has this weird approach on things, and just that getting those basic shapes in there really started to develop this character for me. So out of all these sketches, there's some that I like. You'll notice the one 2 over, it started to look a little bit more like a deer, but that's okay. I can go back and change them up a little bit. It's all part of that process, Again, it's that, back to that process of exploration and process of elimination. So And I like that nose, the way it came out too. It has sort of that funky angle to it. So for me, this one right here was really turning out to be a really good keeper. The other thing that I noticed was really hard in drawing a water buffalo is figuring out the relationship of the horns to those fluffy ears they have. So I think that's really huge in determining their look because it's adding a lot to the silhouette shape, but you have to be very careful. They can easily overlap each other, and then I get a tangency where they're too close to each other, like touching on top, and that's what I didn't want to happen. So, you know, it's all back to that process. What would be really cool, I think I might do, is maybe in part 3 or 4 of this video series, I might go back into this and take all of these designs, but on a separate page, and then draw over them. And sometimes just by changing a line or two, you really create a different character, and you have a much better finalized design that comes out of the process. But I really like this guy quite a bit. I like the saggy eyes. I like that nose on him. I like that sort of goatee of older age that's coming out, and I like the thought of maybe he has. Remember when we were showing water buffaloes, some of them had fur in certain areas, and sometimes they had like dried skin. So I started thinking maybe he has like this dried skin around his face, and then it bleeds into like more fur around him. But I could address that when I get to part of the body sketch on this guy. You'll notice whenever I do horns, I'm always trying to figure out a way to wrap linear detail around there. You know, you have to have something on there. Otherwise, it's just, you know, a negative shape. And I hate sort of dealing with positive and negative shapes. You have to have something that helps indicate some form of texture. Another thing I noticed, which I probably wouldn't, well, I ended up doing it again later, but drawing water buffaloes, the horns are so large in size, they end up overlapping each other. I should have given myself a little bit more space for getting the character in there, because I realized before I start diving, I usually like to start with the face itself. Now I found myself diving into the horns, because if I don't get enough room for the horns to develop, the character's not going to look right, you know. So the horns and those ears are really, to me, the selling factor that make the water buffalo look the way that it does. If I wasn't losing my voice, I'd start to do, when I was drawing this guy, I was imagining this sort of, this guy who just eats a lot of like cheeseburgers and In-N-Out burgers, and he's, you know, just like very happy-go-lucky, and he just sort of lives in the swamp, and he doesn't do any harm to anybody, and he just likes to eat grass and loves to. And I just imagine this, he has like this, you know, his upper lip goes, he has this lower sort of overbite, and these teeth that sort of hang out, and he's just sort of like, you know, guys, I just was hungry and I just feel like doing my thing, and he just has a, you know, just a simple, you know, ness to him, and he's a little overweight. He should exercise a little bit more, you know. I was trying to play off the small eyes against the large forefeatures, having him have a, like this really large upper jaw, and then sort of that, you know, like a double chin, but a double that goes into a triple chin and then mounts under like where his legs are. And his ears too, they should be really organic, because he's no threat, right? No, there should be no angles in there. He should just be really round and sort of happy. It'd be fun to, this would be another character I'd like to take a couple more passes on and see how he develops into finished. Yeah, I really prefer doing the voiceover while I'm drawing, because I sort of lose a little bit of my thought process here. And you know what, it takes like 4 times the amount of time to go back, because I have to take the video, I have to edit the audio out of it, and then I got to go back into it like this, and then I got to get it all prepped, and then I noticed something else was missing that I had at home versus doing it at school, so then I got to go back and forth and into Camtasia, and it's just it's like end up spending 5 or 6 hours just to get a 1 hour video done, versus if I just sit and draw it at one time, it would come out a lot faster. Okay? But anyway. but it's worth it to me because I was trying to think of, now that I finished graduate school, I have some more time, and my freelance slowed down, is about to slow down, about to finish a couple more pieces, and I thought I'd spend some time creating this morning sketch series. So when I get up in the morning and I'm sitting at home, I can just turn on the recorder and just start sketching and drawing. And especially for me in a phase like this is my rough, this is like a good exploration phase of just sitting around and, sketching in the morning. So why not put it up and let everybody else see it, If it inspires you or guides you along, that's what artists should be doing at all levels within, your overall community of networking of other artists, because those artists that you inspire, they go on to be directors, they go on to be art directors of shows, and people remember you and what you do and what your skill sets are and your talents are. And I don't know, that's how I sort of look at that. I did have a couple people that tell me, like, dude, you're putting your work up for free when you could like have your own video channel and charge a subscription fee or whatever. And I'm like, I know, but I don't know. I just feel like when you do something that's positive and you hand that back out to people around the world, I mean, it comes back in different ways, right? And I think for me, doing stuff like this and sketching, and just sharing it. I'm going to do this anyway in the morning. Why not record it and share it? And the cool thing is too is that a lot of the stuff that I do freelance I can't show because I'm on a non-disclosure agreement, and it doesn't matter if it's environments, characters, props, or like a big background painting or whatever it is. I mean, I'm not, you're under that non-disclosure agreement. You've signed a legal binding contract, and you're not supposed to display that work on most cases until it's aired. And then when it's aired, usually if you check back with your producer or whoever, they're totally fine with it. But, you just have to be respectful. And so in some cool way, when I draw at home and when I sketch, this is my work that belongs to me, and nobody else has rights to it. And I can share it and do what I want with it, right? And, why not share it with everybody else out there? You'll notice one of the things I do when I make eyes is I start with a base circle, and then I wrap that circle with a line when I think of like the eyelid itself. And because I think of, this is how I was sort of trained in figure drawing back in the days, you have a socket in your head, right? You have that socket that compresses inward. Then inside that socket you have the eyeball, and then on top of the eyeball you have the eyelid, and then underneath you have the base eyelid, right? And then after that you have the leftover skin or whatever that might go around, that's going to go over from the eye socket, and it's going to bridge over that upper cheekbone, right? So it doesn't matter if you're an animal or a human being. I try to apply that into part of my process when I'm sketching. So you'll notice that. Let me point that out in another minute here. When I do an eye, you'll see me do, there's usually like a set of a couple different circles, Uh-oh, I forgot I jumped back over here to work on the other character real quick. I think this is when I was getting really frustrated. A little note to yourself, right? I think this is one of the characters I was getting really frustrated with. I couldn't figure out how I wanted to finish the bottom of the page, and I kept wanting to go back into it and mess with it. If that happens, and that happens to me quite a bit, where usually at about the 45 or 50 minute mark of drawing, I start to find myself getting locked into something. And you know what? The reason why that happens is because I've spent too much time looking at my work, and I need to just take a break and walk away from it, come back with fresh eyes and a fresh mind. And what I'm doing here is sort of like a big no-no. You'll notice I'm going to go back into it. I'm going to erase, go back, erase. And now I'm nitpicking part of the design, and I shouldn't be doing that. I should just leave it alone, take a little break, and come back. I'm telling you, I do that when I paint digitally. But when I draw characters, I get into that moment when you're like feeling the stroke, and you're having a good time sketching, and it's hard to want to leave that. So, but it's important to do that. Whenever I come back, and it's the same thing, which tell a lot of my students this, is when I come back, I'll look at something and I see it differently than I did when I was working in the middle of it, because I have, just a fresh mindset on what I was doing and how it was coming about. Okay. I think I'm going to do another, when I get to the bodies, I think I'm going to do demos for you guys, but I'm going to set up a little timer next to myself, and I'm going to give myself a limited amount of time and try to sketch out rough body shapes within, like, maybe like a good 3 to 5 minutes per each sketch, and try to fill a page in like 25 or 30 minutes. I think that would be a better approach, because I like what I'm doing here. I was having fun with it, but then I went back and I'm like, oh my God, I drew them so close together. They get sort of hard to see, but when in Rome, right? You're just having fun with it. Okay. But I do like this idea. I hope you guys let me know when you're watching these. Let me know if you like the idea of the morning sketch series of me recording these, because sometimes I'm doing other demos too, and for classes and stuff. And I think it's fun just to talk about a little bit more about drawing and sketching and just the fun part of going out. I wish I have Camtasia on my notebook. It'd be really cool to try to do this if I go to a coffee house and sketch when you're drawing people. I was trying to figure out, I have a little portable Cintiq. If I could get my computer, if I can clean it up a little bit, my laptop could record myself for about 30 minutes on Camtasia while I'm working with the portable Cintiq. I could just sit out at a coffee house and sketch. And the problem is that there'll be all the background noise, and there always is that one or two group of people that are going to walk up and be like, having some conversation about their family, like right in front of you, talking at volume 10. Or you get that one guy who's from another country and he doesn't know how loud he is, and he's on a cell phone, and he's just like sitting there and he's like, and he's just going crazy, and you're like, what is this? You're like, dude, you're in a public place. One of my favorite ones is one of my buddies that I sketch with is Korean, and he speaks Korean fluently, right? And we'll be out sketching, and every now and then a lady comes in there and she's on her phone and she's just like yelling at the top of her voice in Korean, and and the way he says it though, he'll like tell her to be quiet in Korean, and then she like gets all quiet, and it's like, I don't know, maybe it's the difference in how a man speaks to a woman in Korean, but I always think it's funny because they like get really quiet, versus if I say that to somebody in English in the United States, they're like, excuse me, I'm on my phone, and I'm like, I know, but you're in a public place, dude, be quiet, right? Anyway, so with this guy, I was going for sort of this grumpy, lazy water buffalo that's sort of negative about things. I noticed the other guy on the left, he started looking a little bit like a dog, but that's okay. I like this guy. He has these really large looking horns that they're really wide, and they taper off very quickly. And then I was trying to include that into the nose as well, in the ear as well, and even trying to go from the lower, from the chin and the lip here, and then bring that down as well. The one thing I did notice about him that I don't like, you'll have to look at it, look at the measurement between the lower lip and the top of the head, and that's about equal from the lower lip to the base of the neck. And to me, I would want to change that up a little bit. I'm thinking I would probably want to squash the lower neck a little bit more, so because there's a little bit too much similarity there. So by doing that, by avoiding things that are in symmetry or split. All right, guys, so here's sort of I just wanted to show you the finished page that I had from the demo that I was working on for sketching in the morning. So that's sort of my first pass, and if my point of view is I can look through here, and here I'll just mark with red. I'm going to go over the ones I really like. I like this guy right there. And I think that guy's going to be fun too. I like the stubborn guy that's right here. This guy looks a little bit like a dog. I sort of don't like the lower part. I really like this guy quite a bit. I like that guy. This guy's too much of a troll right here. And hold on, I dropped my Cintiq pen. Where is it? In my bag. And there it is. So what I thought of doing is here, if I change his jaw back a little bit like that, he'll look a little bit more like a water buffalo. Okay, when I analyze my own work, that's what I notice. this guy, I don't know, it's really hard to see his horns in here. So, and then his face looks more like, I don't know, he's getting into this weird look like a raccoon meets a deer type of thing. So that guy wasn't as successful. I like this guy's length in here, but I want to go back and I want to play and attach him to the body and see what he might look like. Okay, and then I didn't like this guy right here too much at all. He just came out sort of weird. Looks like some weird water buffalo on, you know, it's been outlawed for looking at, I don't know, being drunk in public or something, right? So anyway, what's important to me is you do a page and you walk away with some good designs, and that's what's really important. That's what has to stick in the back of your brain. And I had fun doing this. It was enjoyable to sit and sketch. I also had one other page I wanted to show you. I didn't turn the recorder on, but this was sort of my first. I did these really rough and really quickly. Let me open them up real quick in Photoshop here. Okay. This was another pass that I did, and this is when I was first looking at my reference. I had my reference up, and I was sort of looking and examining some of the differences. And out of these, I really like this guy a lot right here. I mean, he's a guy I'm going to pursue. And what I really liked about him was his small ears against those large horns. And he looks just like very friendly and sort of an upbeat guy. And then I also sort of like this grumpy guy right here. And then I liked, this was new. I didn't do this yet in my designs, but when I go to the bodies, I really liked incorporating, we talked about that in the reference pages. I really liked incorporating that shape in there. This guy was, wasn't too fond of him. His head's whipping too much. I didn't like him. You know, he looked like some weird water buffalo who got a piercing in New York or something. I don't know. So I'm going to go back again. If I do a page, and the fact that I have 1, 2, 3 designs out of it that I can work off of and expand. The other thing too is this character here felt more like a female. And one of the things I was doing when I was on this is I was imagining when you draw females, a little secret I learned back in the day was adding an upper lip to the female. I actually learned this from the artist Patrick Nagel, okay, back in the 80s. He used to always put a nice big fat upper lip on a woman, and then like the lower lip was lightly suggested, and it makes it look like the lips are very full, like you want to kiss them, right? And that's sort of still true to this day why women put lipstick on top of their lips, right? You know, just to give that feel like they are full of blood and they're kissable, right? So anyway, when I was sketching on that, that's the feel I was getting, was having that nose come down and then she had this lower lip, and it had more of a female trait. And then I was even thinking these rounded soft eyes with maybe even these long sort of eyelashes coming out, something else that I could add to the character. So what I like to do is even when I do my own work, I stop back and I look at it and I can critique it, and I can get a good idea of where I want to go with it, you know. So that, again, the whole process of this is just having fun drawing and being able to go back into that process of elimination and picking out your best ones and continuing forward. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you guys like it. Let me know. Thanks. Take care.